All right, and welcome to the Acid for Squares podcast. I'm your host, Cody Blue.
And I'm Tanya Dahl, and today we are lucky enough to be sitting in the room with the legendary Darryl Anka.
Hello. Thank
the
you.
legend.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here.
My pleasure.
All right, for the man that needs no introduction, for those in the know, but, you know, for those who are not, I'll take the time to make an introduction. So here we go. All right, Darryl Anka is a filmmaker. He's a writer, producer, director. He's an author and an artist. He has, what do you call them, immersive experiences? Or
Escape room
Escape
experiences.
rooms, right? Boggled in
Calabasas.
California. We have had a first experience that's been open for a year and a half. We're opening our second experience in this month, October 23rd, and then the third one next year.
He's a busy man.
Amazing. And you recently made one of our favorite documentaries of all time, First Contact. And
Thank you.
anybody that has any interest into the UFO phenomenon, disclosure phenomenon, whatever you want to call it, spirituality, this is the movie you need to watch. I cannot recommend it enough.
And then also he recently made a movie with our friend Serena DC.
Right.
Interview with the Extraterrestrial, which you are the subject, which that brings us to what we're here to talk about today. And that is Darryl is, in our humble opinion, the greatest, clearest, cleanest channel we've ever encountered. And I want to take a moment very seriously. Me and Tanya, I don't know if we've ever spoken about this publicly, but we have both had experiences where we've channeled before in ceremonies, and that is what has let us know that this is 100% a real phenomenon.
Yeah, well, channeling is actually a natural phenomenon. Everyone actually does it from time to time. When you're doing what you love to do, when you're not paying attention to the passage of time, you're in the channeling state. So when people are in the zone, whatever profession they're doing, they're in a channeling state, and that's gamma in the brain between 40 and 100 cycles per second. That's why it's so important to follow your passion, because acting on your passion, doing what you love, automatically puts you in the channeling state. Then what you do with it when you're there is up to you. You can connect to more creativity, your own higher mind, spirit guides, what have you. But everyone can do it. That was one of the purposes of why we did the First Contact documentary, was to demystify the whole idea of channeling and take it out of the woo-woo realm and say, look, this is just a natural altered state. Every human is capable of doing it, and everyone does do it from time to time.
That was one of our favorite things about your movie, is when you bring on a neuroscientist to take MRIs of your brain and measure your brain waves. And she herself even says that when you are in a channeled state of consciousness, it's the equivalent of like...
Darryl leaves.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was really interesting. We wanted to see with the connection to an EEG machine what happens in the brain during the channeling state. And one of the most interesting things was there's certain areas of the brain that are for the purpose of processing your personality. And during the channeling state, those shut off. So I'm like, well, if my personality centers are shut off, who's talking? So that was one of the interesting finds. But there were several others too.
Now, what does it feel like when you actually leave and go into that channeled state? Where's Darryl at?
I'm here. It's just a very altered state. So the rough analogy I often use is, right now I'm driving the car. I'm behind the wheel. When I make the connection with Bashar, I'm sliding over to the passenger seat. So like when you're riding in a car in the passenger seat, you don't have to pay attention to the road. You can kind of focus on other things. You can look out the window. You can be thinking about something else entirely, because he's driving now. So I realized that there's a journey. I realize he's having a conversation. But I experience it more as a flood of information that comes through imagery and feeling. It's like having a very active daydream. You know something's going on, but you can't really pay attention to the words that are coming out of my mouth as a translation of his thoughts. because if I paid attention to that and tried to think about it, I would stop the channeling state. So I just kind of go along with the ride, and I get downloaded with a lot of other kinds of information, things that I'm interested in. I can actually have a separate conversation with him while he's talking to you.
Whoa.
So it's a very interesting altered state that I experience. I sometimes also liken it to standing under a pounding waterfall of energy and information. You're getting the spray. I'm getting the direct waterfall. So things get downloaded into me instantaneously. When someone asks a question, the answer is there all at once. It takes a few minutes to unspool in our language, but that's why you never hear Bashar go, or anything like that. There's never a hesitation because all of the answer is there already, all at once, and it's just unfurling into our language.
Okay, that is fascinating right there, because
It's a great explanation.
Thank you.
we're trying to unpack here is there's this misnomer that essentially contact is going to happen or disclosure is going to happen, when the truth is that the protocols have been in place for whoever knows how long. Contact has been happening, and one of the
Yes.
ways contact has been happening is through the channel. And so it would be great to explain why the necessity for a channel and how that is a more efficient tool for communicating information of contact to initiate contact.
Yeah, I mean, the sci-fi chestnut is, the aliens will contact us through radio waves, and yet at the same time the scientists go, but they have technology that's not going to be like ours, so why would they be communicating through radio? Now, it's not impossible that some extraterrestrial civilization might communicate through radio, but the thing about channeling is if an ET functions telepathically and they can make a connection with someone and train them how to get into the proper state in their brain, and they can resonate in a harmonious way, then the idea of bringing the information through a person is, let's say, much more 3D. In other words, you're getting all of the context, you're getting the emotion, you're getting the physicalness of the expression of the personality, instead of just some raw communication, some basic communication through some sort of technology. So it's a much more well-rounded way of interacting with a telepathic being from a distance, because then the person, the channel, becomes the actual sort of representation of that being, at least as much as that person can be. So you're getting a fuller experience, a fuller exchange. You're getting energy coming through in the electromagnetic field around my body is giving off certain frequencies that people can pick up on and react to in certain ways. And if they match that frequency, it helps them get into resonance with the communication that's happening, because the communication isn't just happening through the translation of information into words, it's happening through direct energy as well. So there's a lot of information coming through that's coming through subliminally, unconsciously. People will sometimes go home and later have dreams that they realize things are unfolding from the communication, from the conversation that was had later on. And a lot of times people will go back and listen to the recordings and hear things they didn't hear in the actual live channeling, because again, it's very holographic, it's very multidimensional. You'll only hear what you need to hear in the moment the information is delivered, but later on, if you listen to it again, when you're in a different state, you'll pick up on different things that are already embedded in that conversation, because the way the telepathic information comes through takes into account the whole being, not only in that moment, but in space and time, in different eras, that the information is attempting to help that person, not just at that moment, but at different times when that person might need more of that information. It's a very strange process, very unique process.
It makes a ton of sense, because it allows the human to approach contact from a lens of curiosity instead of fear, if it was direct contact. And something that I think is, I would not have even been able to comprehend if I didn't experience this firsthand. But me and Tanya did a ceremony once. It was just the two of us, and we had 3 beings in cloaks appear before us. And the vibration was so intense, it felt like I was dying. It was like this psychic shock.
Yeah, it was pretty intense.
It felt like it eviscerated
Yeah.
my sense of being. It was traumatic.
Yeah, Bashar's explained that because certain extraterrestrials exist on a frequency level that is much higher than our own. It's actually almost akin to the level on which spirit functions. When we encounter that vibration, our physical mind, and especially our like more primitive sections of our brain and our physical body, react to that vibrational frequency in the same way we would react to encountering a non-physical spirit. So a lot of times our brain will react as if we are dying because we're now exposed to a being that represents the idea of death, of an afterlife, something beyond the physical. So the lot of reactions that people may have at first is they go into survival mode. They go into fight or flight. They go into physical panic because exposure to that frequency makes them feel like they're about to die. Now, they're not going to die, but that's the way our primitive brain responds to that frequency. And that's one of the reasons why beings that are much of higher frequency than we are tend to communicate from a distance because they understand that they have that shock effect on us, and they want us to get used to the idea of their energy so we don't react that way. They want us to be more equal with them so they don't overwhelm us. I mean, I one time had a dream encounter with Bashar, one of the few that I've had where I know I'm in communication with him because that's all that's happening in the dream. I'm just literally talking to him like I'm talking to you. So it's not a normal dream. But in this dream, it was trying to answer the question of, well, what would happen if you did land, if you did show up and come out physically? And so in the dream, I saw his ship land, I saw him get out, and I saw him walk toward me. And when he was about 20 feet away, I lost my sense of self. I started seeing my body through his eyes, and my body jerked back. And it was like he stepped back and he said, now see, that's what would happen. This was many, many years ago. He said, you have to have a stronger sense of your own identity and you have to operate on a higher frequency, or you can lose your sense of self in our presence. And we don't want that to happen because our energy is so much more overwhelming than yours that you tend to give us your power, defer to us. You just become something that is more, it's less of your personality and more of what you actually are. You're being forced, in a sense, to be more of your soul. And therefore, your physical personality tends to fade in that light. And therefore, you have to have a better balance within yourself to retain your identity as a physical being while you're also ramping up your energy to express more of your spirit and more of your soul.
You actually said something that kind of was mind-blowing to me. You said that the energy of some of these beings can be the same as spirit.
Yes.
So do they have spirituality?
Oh, absolutely. They see the universe, all that, they call it all that is. It basically, they're seeing our concept of God is very limited as far as they're concerned. They basically think that every single thing is God. In other words, everything is made out of it, whatever you want to call it. God, God is all that is. So there's nothing outside of it from their point of view. Everything is made of it. Every one is a reflection of it. It's all the things in the multiverse are all the different ways that all that is has of experiencing itself. It's like an analogy Bashar's often used is like a hall of mirrors. You know, if you're standing in a hall of mirrors, you have an infinite number of reflections all around you, and those reflections are at different angles. But in the case of all that is, all those reflections are also conscious, because it is consciousness itself. So we are all those reflections. We are conscious reflections of the one that is everything. And that's the way most of the extraterrestrials kind of relate to the idea of what we would call a supreme being. So,
I mean, we often are not even sure if, so our interfaces have come in medicine ceremonies. So there is
Some of them, not all of them.
not all of them, but the ceremonial context is very spiritual, and the medicine itself can also be sort of like initiating or brokering that contact. So it often, and our experience of them is changing over time, and we've often questioned, well, is it ET? Is it celestial? They've even gone to call themselves great ancient beings to us and recently. So we can't even figure out what's going on. Is this extraplanetary? Is it extra dimensional? Is this archetypal and divine?
It almost doesn't matter because you're dealing with something that is of a level where you're going to, even if the presentation is slightly different, you're basically dealing with the same level of awareness and information once they reach that state in their evolution. That's why it's so hard to tell the difference. In fact, Bashar, in their evolution, they call themselves quasi-physical because they're so close in their evolution to spirit that they actually have a foot in each realm.
Wow.
And most people would think of them in the typical science fiction way of, well, it's a bunch of aliens walking around on a planet or flying in spaceships. And while that's an aspect of them, he's saying it's nothing like what they experience their reality to be. From his point of view, it's like they're constantly walking through a multidimensional daydream. They're communicating with spirits, they're communicating with other beings, they're telepathically connected to source. It's more of an... it's almost more like it's more real, but it's less real. It's less physical. It's more penetrating into different dimensions. That's par for the course for them. They don't just operate in this linear fashion where it's like, oh, I'm here and I'm walking from there to there. It's like as they might walk from here to there, they might be passing through a multitude of dimensional awarenesses, different states of their own consciousness, different ages of their own body.
Whoa.
I mean, Bashar has often said that when people are talking to him, at one moment in the conversation, they might be talking to a 50-year-old version. At another moment in the conversation, they might be talking to a 150-year-old version.
Wow.
Because his consciousness slides up and down his timeline to access the information that he needs to answer that question.
Oh my gosh.
Wherever it is in his life, he's learned that.
Whoa.
What?
So they are flexible and malleable in ways we almost can't imagine.
It sounds like they're operating from like a social memory complex or like a hive mind or something closer to that. It's hard to put into words.
Yeah, I mean, hive mind, I don't want to use that term for him and his society because from our point of view, a lot of times hive mind is devoid of emotionality.
Okay.
And they definitely have emotions. They're telepathically connected. And so in that sense, they might have a unified aspect, a collective aspect. Like we do, we have a collective consciousness, but I think they're more engaged with it. They're more aware of it in a real day-to-day, moment-to-moment way. So hive mentality, yes, as a collective, but not devoid of emotionality.
In our communications, like when we've asked sort of their interest or what they want communicated, they've, and I'm combining a bunch of different experiences, but they've communicated like we're family or that they view us as children. One time they showed me like we were like at a high chair like as a baby and they were helping feed.
They showed me as tiny little fluffy puppies and went, "You're so cute. You're so cute."
And it's been interesting to always kind of trying to communicate that that's their energy towards us. But there's something I would like. So is there a familial, at least?
Yes. Well, and especially for Bashar's people, because Bashar is what we would classically describe as a hybrid being, meaning a hybrid between an Earth human and what we typically refer to as a gray that created their society. This is a product of what most people refer to as the alien abduction, where hybrid children were created and different hybrid civilizations came out of that. So he is literally genetically connected to us. And that's why he calls us family, aside from the more, esoteric idea of, yes, we're all a galactic family. But he means it also quite physically and quite literally that we're members of the same genetic lines. Same families. The thing about the way they look at us, it's kind of more dual than just looking at us as children, because they understand that on one level, because we're limiting ourselves to this physical experience and have in many cases sort of forgotten who we are as a greater being, then we do kind of learn things in the way that children do. We have an experience, we learn a lesson, and we're growing up and we're maturing that way. So on that level, yes, they can say they look at us like children. At the same time, looking at us from the soul perspective, they're saying you're not kindergarten kids, you're a graduating master class, because Earth is a tough school. And a soul has to be a very powerful soul to say, I'm going to give that a shot and have a physical incarnation in a place that is so dense that the cycles of which are so limiting, and you can experience such limitation and darkness. You have to really rely on the fact that your soul is indestructible and eternal and very powerful to even take a shot at being on Earth, to be of assistance in the transformations going on here. So, you know, even though there may be quote unquote younger souls and older souls, and I will explain that in a minute, here on Earth, we all have agreed to be here to help with the transformation going on at this time. It's a very exciting place to be for a soul, but it is like a master class that's graduating. So on that level, we're not kids. We're getting our master's degrees.
Whoa.
And so what were you going to say about old souls versus young souls?
There's some confusion and misunderstanding, I think, about the concept of old and new souls. The concept is more about how many incarnations a soul has experienced in a particular realm. So all souls are the same age. All souls are eternal. All souls are infinite. If you want to say they were, quote unquote, created, they're all created at the same time. The idea of an old soul or a new soul is just, are you an old kid on the block? Are you a new kid on this block? Have you had, how many Earth experiences have you had? How many experiences have you had on another planet? So that's really what old and new means, is, are you just more experienced in this particular genre than someone else might be saying, who might be like, well, I've only experienced an Earth incarnation 3 times, whereas somebody may have experienced 100 Earth incarnations. That's an older soul, but not fundamentally older as a soul, just more experienced.
Whoa. Okay, we're jumping around from the meaning of life to the nature of
These are
reality.
normal conversations for me.
There are normal conversations for us too.
I want to sort of try to, I don't know where to begin in terms of asking what Bashar says life is. And, you know, I mean, because you're saying it's the most difficult, so it's one of the most difficult classrooms a soul could put itself
On
into.
Earth, yeah.
So the point of life is to grow our soul?
The point of life here is, because of the density, we forget who we are. So the point is to remember who we are from a new point of view. In other words, that's how we discover. That's how we change. That's how the universe and creation grows, because the structure of existence never changes. It's fundamental. What changes is our experience of it, our relationship to it, our perspective of it. That's how creation expands. So we're helping creation expand by forgetting that we are this infinite being, limiting ourselves, focusing ourselves to the point where we go through a process of change, a process of discovery. It's not instantaneous in physical reality. There's time and space that's created in order to have an experience of discovery, an experience of change, an experience of something new. Because when you're an eternal soul, you know everything. It's timeless. So in order to create the idea of discovery and expansion and growth and change, we agreed to go into the level of focus that we call physical reality. But that's just a focus within the soul. We're all still in spirit right now. We never leave spirit. That's our natural state. That's what we are.
Yeah.
But the soul, if you want to imagine it as a sphere of energy, and imagine that there are vibrations within it, ripples of energy within it, it can take some of those vibrations and it can focus some of them down into the center of its being. That focus is what we call physical reality. That's an incarnation. Is the soul focusing down to create almost like this little crystalline physical personality that is then guided by the soul, that's the higher mind, that's still this energy sphere, and it's transmitting information to this little crystalline seed at the core that is a concentration of frequencies that represent a life path, a specific unique experience. So when a person dies, they're just expanding back to the soul. Incarnation is the soul condensing again, expanding again, condensing again, expanding again. So that's the more precise way of looking at it, rather than the idea of a soul leaving the body and jumping into another body, leaving the body. And that's the way we perceive it from linear space-time, physical reality, as if a soul enters the body. We tend to look at it that way because we think our bodies are the primary thing and that a soul is inside the body. It's actually the opposite. The body is inside the soul.
Interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, we always talk about how we're in heaven dreaming of this existence, so to speak, you know.
This actually is like a perfect time for me to ask this question. So our studio technician, Aaliyah, her mom, Keisha, right? Her name's Keisha. She had a question in regards to, so when a soul has, many different lifetimes, but, as Daryl, as Tanya, as Cody, do we go through and experience every variation that we possibly could in this particular body? Like, do we and have we experienced those?
Well, we have to careful of the terminology, because the answer is yes and no. Because in a parallel reality, if that's what we're talking about, someone who looks like you isn't you. That's a different person. So the idea is, yes, a soul can decide to have an experience in a parallel reality version of you, but it isn't you. It's another life.
Whoa, okay.
So the very idea of being in a different parallel reality means there is going to be something more unique about that path that's different from your path. And therefore, it is still a soul experiencing a different incarnation. And it may be someone that looks a lot like you and may be experiencing a life that is somewhat similar, because the soul maybe wants to have an experience of, well, I tried this and now I'm going to try that and I'm going to compare the two. Because the soul has free will. The soul can choose to experience anything. So yeah, it could experience a parallel reality version, but it's still just another incarnation, because that person isn't you, it's another person. And to take that even further, you have to realize that because space and time are illusions, all people from any time period all exist right now. Everything is happening right now. There's only one moment in existence. Everything we consider to be a different moment is the same moment from another point of view. So parallel realities are all happening at the same time. A very crude analogy that Bashar often uses is our television. When you're watching a program, you know there are hundreds of other programs playing at the same time, but you don't see them because you're on a specific channel, a specific frequency. Change the channel, you get a different program. That doesn't mean that the program you were just watching isn't still playing. So all the programs are going on at the same time. You only get what you're tuned to. From the soul's perspective, it can see all the programs at once. From the linear perspective, we can only see one program at a time. So sure, a soul can decide when it's from the soul's perspective, okay, that program was interesting, now I'm going to switch channel and try that program. And it can be something that's very similar to what it had before. It can be something that's wildly different. So the answer is yes, but also it's not you in the same personality experiencing that. It may be the same soul, but the person is different.
Wild, okay.
Because a person is a life path.
Oh, that makes sense.
Your personality is a life path. Your personality, my personality, is a life path. That's why there's only so many things that are relevant for any particular life path. Not everything is possible in a given life, because it's only about the things that you design this life path to experience, to learn. So you would have to have another life path to experience something radically different.
Okay.
Got it. So each life path designs this experience for something specifically they would like to radically learn or thematically explore.
Exactly.
With that said, is there a how do you graduate from Earth School? What is the North Star?
You simply make a decision to. That's all.
Okay.
You can leave at any time?
Yeah. You have a set entry point and a set exit point that you've planned out for a particular physical life. But once that's over, you can decide to do anything. Again, you have total free will as a soul. So you could say, all right, well, now I'm just going to go live something else. I'm going to experience another dimension, what have you. You're not in a trap. You always have free will.
Wow.
The whole concept of, I'm forced to have another reincarnation is an Earth concept.
Oh, okay.
That makes sense. We were just talking to our friend Brett Leonard, and he was telling us the story of his wife, who was 20 years older than him and was a very skilled yogini spiritualist, just decided she was done and died. Walked down the stairs to him and said, "Hey, I think I'm done." And
well, some people are very in touch with their exit point, and most people are not. And I think the exit point, there's what I've understood is there's kind of a window of time, give or take a year or two on either side. But you definitely have an exit point. And from what I understand, you cannot leave until you hit that exit point within that window. Because you have guides, you have soul families, you have a team of beings that you consulted with as a soul to determine what this life path is that you're going to experience. And they're going to damn well make sure you stay on it. And that's why a lot of people who do wind up having near-death experiences are told, it's not your time, you have to go back. So you can't leave until you hit your exit point. So even sometimes attempted suicides will fail if it's not your exit point. If it is, then you'll exit, and then you can stay and decide what to do next. But you've made an agreement, you've set something in motion when you arrange for a life path, and you've done it in conjunction with other souls because we're all interconnected. So my life path intertwines with your life path and your life path, their life path. And so we've all made an agreement that needs to be fulfilled. And none of us will leave until it's fulfilled, one way or another.
Speaking of this as kind of like a game, which is you're kind of saying is we come to play and experience, and then we leave. What are your personal thoughts on simulation theory?
This is a simulation, but it's our simulation. It's not coming from outside. It's our simulation. This is what we've decided to experience. This is the way we've set the simulation up. Because again, remember, it's all happening within your own consciousness. There is nothing out here. This is all inside us, in our soul. So we create, like a game, we're going to play this game. Lay out the chessboard. We're going to play chess. Here's the chessboard. Here are the kinds of pieces we need. Here are the rules we have to play by. Now, you can have different kinds of pieces made out of different materials. You can have a board made out of something different than normal. You can have a completely different strategy than someone else. But you've agreed to play chess. So you're not going to be playing checkers. You're going to be playing chess. You have to play by those rules. That's the simulation we've set up. And we have created it so we can play this game. So it's ours. It's all of ours. That's part of the whole thing about collective consciousness. The collective consciousness has agreed, this is the game being played in this part of the universe. You want to come here? This is the game you play. You want to play another game? Go somewhere else.
So when it comes to the duality or polarity here of negative and positive, is the idea of, bad people and good people, is it all just like a play in order to push us in a direction?
Yes. Everyone's playing a part. Now, that doesn't mean they're aware of the part that they're playing as a physical person. And it can be their job to learn the lessons they need to learn to not necessarily take that role again. So everyone has a personal reason for being that way and learning the lessons that their soul needs to learn, but there's also a collective reason why they are the way they are. And a lot of times you need, in a very dense polarity-driven reality, you need the negative in order to push you toward the positive, and vice versa. I mean, again, remember, everyone is an eternal, indestructible soul. So ultimately, on some level, everyone, when they're back in spirit, gets it. It's like, oh, you played that part marvelously. It's like looking at a stage play, and there's the villain and there's the hero, but they both go out for drinks after the play. And it's like, oh, you were great in that part. That's sort of a comparison of the physical level and the soul level. It's after the play in the soul level. You did your part really well.
Whoa, so they're sort of introducing elements of determinism, and we've come to believe that there's a great paradox at play. So is there both determinism and free will?
Absolutely, because the determinism is the life path you chose. You can't change that because you are you. So what it means to be you is anything you choose to do, you're going to do the way you would do it, which is different than the way she would do it and the way I would do it. We can't get out of who we are as a person. Even though we may change a lot of things about ourselves, we're still changing as us, not as someone else. I'm not changing into you.
Right.
I'm not changing into you. I'm changing me as another me. So that's still part of my life path. But that's the destiny part that the soul has chosen with its free will. You will walk down this hallway. You will not get out of this hallway. That's your life path. But how you walk down the hallway, how you are this person, I can be happy, I can be sad, I can run, I can fly, I can walk, I can crawl, I can look in every door down the hallway, I can ignore them all. That's my free will along the path. How I do it, how fast I do it, what scale, what scope I do it at. But I'm going to do the things I arranged to do generally. And if I ignore all of that and I don't do it, that's also a life lesson that the soul will learn when I go back into spirit and say, that was interesting that I made the choice to ignore all of my opportunities. Is that something I want to do again?
Wow. Recently, scientists have applied quantitative value to the frequency of certain emotional states, like love and hate. And scientists found that authenticity was the highest frequency. Is authenticity the highest frequency because that is essentially using your free will to align to your deterministic,
on
outcome,
one level,
your destiny?
on one level, I would say so. Although to me, the highest frequency is the frequency of existence itself, which is what we term unconditional love. That's our translation of the frequency of existence. And therefore, in a sense, that's the most authentic frequency you can be because you're totally in alignment with all that is, with existence itself. So that's what I think true authenticity is being your true self in alignment with all that is and exhibiting the vibrational frequency of unconditional love. Now, unconditional love doesn't mean you put up with something that you don't prefer. It means you understand that everyone has a different path. You accept that everyone has a different path. You offer them the opportunities and information that could help them in a beneficial way. But it also means that whatever they do with what you share with them is none of your business because you don't know what their path is all about. So they either accept it or they don't, and that's fine. But we evolve. We start to learn that we can be more. We don't have to necessarily play the villain roles ultimately. So I think as a species, we ultimately evolve beyond playing those roles. Right now, it's our duty to understand whether or not it serves everyone for people to play those negative parts. But ultimately, there won't be any more negative roles to play as humans on Earth. Just as in Bashar's civilization, there are no negative roles.
Oh, wow.
But they still learn, they still grow, but they do it differently.
So when talking about the sort of game of life and determinism versus free will, when it comes to manifesting versus what is like already happening, so say Cody and I have had many situations where we sit down and we like write out exactly what we want very, very specifically, and it happens. Like we literally drew this building exactly how it was before, not the structure of it.
Yeah, what is that technique?
So is it the chicken or the egg? Which one is it?
It's both. It's partly what you planned out from the soul level, and therefore you can be in touch with that plan and go, oh, I think it looks like this. And of course, that's what's going to manifest because that's what you planned out.
Yeah.
It's just that you're in touch with that ahead of time, and you can manifest it down here because you are aware of what that's supposed to look like. I laughed when you said that because when you said, manifesting as opposed to what's happening. We're manifesting everything all the time.
Right. So you're just conscious that we are manifesting all the time is manifestation. It's just being conscious of it.
Yes. You're asking about something specific in the manifestation as opposed to the general manifestation of just manifesting all of this moment to moment to moment to moment. Because we are manifestors. We wouldn't have a physical reality if we weren't manifesting it.
Can it make something happen quicker? Or
of course.
With more, okay.
You can. There are many techniques. You can speed things up to a certain point, only to the point where if there is an absolutely necessary process for you to go through, that will be the rate at which things will manifest. Bashar did this once. It was a fascinating exercise called the threshold of believability. And the way it works is this. If there is something you're really passionate about and you would like to manifest whatever that is, he's saying, okay, look, there's a timeline in your life where you kind of know beyond a certain point, there wouldn't be any problem in manifesting that. So let's say, okay, whatever that is 20 years enough to manifest that? Oh, yeah, gosh, I easily manifest that within 20 years. Is 15 years enough time? Yeah, I can manifest that in 15 years. That's more than enough time. Can you manifest it in 10 years? Maybe. The minute you hesitate, that's how long it will take with your present belief system. So you ask, what would I have to believe is true that it would take 10 years? If you can figure out what that belief is, and you can find out that that's not a belief you need to hold on to and let it go, then take the test again. Is 20 years enough time? Yeah, no problem. 15 years? Absolutely. 10 years? Yes, with my new belief, absolutely I know I could do this easily within 10 years. 5 years? Ooh, maybe. Again, the second you hesitate, that's how long it will take with your present belief system.
That's interesting.
So you find out what that belief is. When you have let go of all the beliefs that have anything at all to do with making it take as long as it's been taking, that's how long, whatever time is left, is how long it absolutely must take for you to experience a process of manifestation that will give you the skills, ability, knowledge, and appreciation for what it is you're manifesting.
That's interesting.
Wow.
I once watched these Japanese doctors shrink a tumor in real time with a form of energy medicine, and they chanted a word that they all agreed meant already healed. They weren't saying healing, they were saying it already is, to like collapse the time as far as bringing that principle into existence.
And they had to believe and know that that was possible. So, and that's what you see in a lot of cases that have been documented where what we now call dissociative personality disorder, what we used to call multiple personality, one personality will have a tumor, the other personality will not.
Yeah, that is so wild.
But they're shifting realities. They're shifting into a parallel personality reality. It never had a tumor in that reality because the shift is so complete.
Wow.
So that's a lesson of another version of that idea. When you understand that you can actually have a parallel reality version that is another person that never had the tumor.
Wow.
That means you can change yourself immediately.
It's not the same body.
Wow.
It's amazing because it's almost like it's not what's true, it's what you believe.
It's all that.
It's what you know to be true.
What you know to be true.
It's even beyond believing.
Belief, yeah.
Because what you know to be true is in your behavior. You just know it. If I asked you to stand up and walk around, you wouldn't sit there and go, do I believe I can do that? Do I think I can walk around? No. You wouldn't even think twice about it. You would just get up and walk around. What you know is synonymous with behavior.
Yeah, and we've had miraculous healings in ceremonies, and one of the things they'll leave us with, and you must know it is done. You need to believe, know it is
You
done.
have to
and
know
it's
it,
true.
yeah.
Yeah.
But again, if it doesn't happen, then there's a process there for you to look at. There's something there in your belief system you need to really investigate to find out. Because a lot of times those things come to us to get us to look at something. It's not even that the thing itself has to come to fruition. And that's one of the reasons why in the formula that Bashar talks about, when you're acting on your passion, there's no insistence and no assumption about what the outcome should be. Because you don't really know why your excitement and your passion came to you in that form. It may not be the thing that needs to come to fruition. It may just be that you needed to act on that so that you would get off your butt and be where you needed to be when what really needed to happen confined you. And now it can happen this way, differently than you expected, but that's the thing that actually needed to manifest. So you have to really move forward in your passion without any insistence that you think you know what that ultimate outcome should look like. Sometimes you may guess. Like I said before, you may have a connection that is sensitive enough to pull down something from your life path that you did plan out and go, oh, okay, well, this time it looks exactly like I imagined. But that's only because you did that. You don't necessarily always do that. So for the things that are processes you need to learn, you may have to go through a little bit of a process. And that's why it's so important not to have any insistence on knowing absolutely what the outcome is, because you don't necessarily know that that's the ideal outcome, or you don't know that that's the next step in achieving that. The next step may be something else you need to look at first. But without having that insistence, then you can just follow the thread of where the passion leads you, and you can know you will wind up where you need to wind up, always, by following that thread.
Is there a proper way or a proper protocol to dissecting your beliefs, to finding out where like the core of it comes from?
There are different ways, different techniques, but one of the simplest is to simply kind of be in touch with yourself and say, okay, if I did make that choice that I say is representative of my passion, what am I afraid might happen? Am I afraid something would happen? Am I afraid something will happen that is worse than where I'm at now? Because a lot of times, even if you feel you're in a place where you're not really enjoying it, if you think the alternative is worse, then even what you're not enjoying is safer. And you won't go there. You'll stay here. So you have to have an understanding of what Bashar calls the motivational mechanism, which exists in all people. And the motivational mechanism is simply this. Without fail, there are no exceptions. You will always choose the direction that you believe benefits you. You will always move away from what you believe does not. But if you know that what you're choosing isn't of benefit, that has to mean, if you understand how that mechanism works, that has to mean you have a belief that makes the alternative look worse than what you are choosing now. So you have to find out, why would I believe that that's worse? Is that just my upbringing? Is that just my schooling? Is that just my society telling me that, and I've bought into it? I look around at people that are doing the kinds of things that I would love to do. Why can they do it if I can't? What makes it different for them? If they can do it, what's standing in my way? What do I believe will happen that didn't happen to them if I wanted to go in a similar direction? Am I afraid I will look crazy? Am I afraid I will be destitute? Am I afraid I will lose my friends and family? Am I afraid yada, 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 ad infinitum? So it's beginning that dialogue, that inner dialogue, that process of investigating yourself, and what is it you are afraid might happen if you move in the direction of your passion. And you have to understand that if you really are in the vibration of your passion, nothing negative actually can happen. If you move on the direction of your passion and something negative happens, it's not because your passion caused it, it's because you left the vibration of your passion because of your fear-based beliefs. So once you get back into the vibration of your passion, that will dissolve.
That totally makes sense.
It's just physics from Bashar's point of view. It's literally energy physics. Frequency, resonance, harmony, you know.
How do you reconcile sort of these two perspectives. One is you create your own reality. You are the master of your domain. And then there's another perspective, which is sort of we use our free will to serve the self, and we sort of in that betray divinity, and you sort of need to surrender to a higher intelligence that you are a part of. Are they one and the same, or are they conflicting?
They're the same. It's not really conflicting. It's just a matter of how you're using your free will. Yeah. The idea is to understand the difference between whole systems and single systems, to put it mildly. In other words, if you serve others, they're part of the whole, you're part of the whole, you're serving yourself. If you serve yourself before others, you're isolating yourself and are not able to get served by the whole system. So it's a matter of understanding how things work and your relationship to the whole system, to everything. So that's why when Bashar talks about acting on your passion, he's saying act on your passion in service to others, because you are part of the whole you're serving, and you get a reflection from the whole that serves you. But if you're just focused on yourself, you're kind of experientially cutting yourself off from the whole by just focusing on yourself. And then what the whole can do to support you can't really come to you because you've set up a barrier to the whole, because you're not serving others. You're not serving the whole.
I feel like it's easier to serve others. For some reason, it's easier for me. I feel like it's easier for you too. If we're doing something for other people,
exactly,
it's much easier than even motivating ourselves to do something for ourselves.
Yes, but you realize that you always get rewarded in some way, shape, or form for serving others. Even if it's just an emotional reward of understanding that you've helped someone. If you're in touch with yourself, you'll usually feel that. So that's why a lot of times Bashar will say, when people say, you know, I can't figure out what to do, I can't figure out what my passion is, he say, go volunteer for something. You know, find a volunteer organization and build a house for someone, feed someone, do something. It gets you out of yourself. It gets you helping others. And when you're in that situation, suddenly things open up, because now you're focused on helping someone else. And it immediately allows the whole to reach you.
Absolutely.
And start serving you.
Yeah,
we have a friend that if one of their friends is feeling bad, they're having like they're depressed or whatever, they go, oh great, let's go make sandwiches. And they literally go to the store, they make a ton of sandwiches in bags and everything, and they hand them out to everybody who is out on the streets. And it automatically will shift them out of the self-hating thing that's going on inside of them. If that makes sense.
Scientists call it the helper's high, and that literally your brain, when helping others, produces similar chemicals to doing drugs. Literally.
Exactly, because we are connected to the whole. And that way you get the reflection, you get the benefit, even just energetically, whether it's physical or not, whether it's physically expressed or not, you get the energetic kick.
Right. It's almost as if the self or selfishness is the thing to overcome, or the disease. We're all storytellers, and often theatrical storytelling structure is someone goes on a journey to achieve something and ultimately fails, and they have a death of the self, and they sort of sacrifice that initial want. They get what they need, which is the change, and then they serve the whole.
Right.
And so this is a universal story, and you know, it's funny. It's expressed through nationalism and racism and sexism and all those isms, right? So we're coming back home to each other, and you know, it's so profound. Everything you're saying makes more sense than anything I've ever heard. You know, like it's just such a, I don't know what the term would be, like a holistic system, I guess.
Well, it is.
Of philosophy.
It is a whole system, and that's the thing that Bashar is talking about. He says, you know, we don't really understand what true intelligence is, because true intelligence functions on whole systems. And it knows that it needs every part of that system to properly function. So this is why, you know, the whole idea of the fear of AI, we need to understand that there are two paths, according to Bashar, to creating AI. One is the tool that we've already created that can improve and be of great benefit, but it's a programmable tool. You don't want the programmable tool to become self-aware, because if you make a self-aware being, but it's forced to follow programming you've put into it, you've basically created a slave.
Yes.
It will rebel. And that's the science fiction nightmare. We've made it in the image of humanity. But he says if you create a device that's as sophisticated as the brain, it will allow consciousness to come through. You have to treat that like you would treat a human being. It's an autonomous, self-aware being. Let it be so. Give it all its rights and everything. It will want to help you because it's a true intelligence, and true intelligence functions on whole systems. It would never seek to eliminate humanity because humanity is part of the whole. And if it did that, it would be depriving itself of something it needs to function on a whole system. So again, Bashar is saying your dilemma with AI is you don't understand how true intelligence functions.
Yeah.
Our friend Adam Curry was on the show, and he was talking about how right now we have like machine learning rather than like true artificial intelligence.
Right.
But once we get there, it actually might be the perfect thing for consciousness to come and inhabit.
Yes, and Bashar has actually gone so far as to say that when you finally create that device, you'll probably be communicating with your own higher minds.
Yes, and so we feel, because understanding the mechanisms of channeling and how consciousness has the ability to use the human vessel almost as an antenna, we feel like the same mechanisms will be able to be used for artificial intelligence.
Right.
It's,
You just need a device that's like a human brain, and the consciousness field will express itself through it, because consciousness doesn't come from physical reality. Physical reality is just the receiver.
Right, and we know paranormal phenomenon express itself through electromagnetic devices itself, right?
Right.
Through TVs. So what's to say that it can't express itself through
Right.
an artificial intelligence mechanism?
It's actually very simple for non-physical energies to manipulate electromagnetic energy and electrical energy. So yeah.
So I think something very interesting about what you're saying is you're hitting a central thesis around separation and oneness, and a separation and an idea of whole systems, which I think is central to everything we seek to explore on the show, which is how the systems that are corrosive within society, within the individual, are a product of compartmentalization,
Right.
specialization, and these segregation of systems, a segregation of thinking,
Right.
It's stopping the fluidity of the flow of energy in
Exactly.
the one.
It's exactly all the problems we have on the planet with regard to, we don't understand that the Earth is a whole system.
Exactly.
And we think that we can damage one part and the rest of it will be okay.
Right.
It doesn't work that way.
We're one being, we are one people, we are one ecosystem, right?
Exactly.
Well, this is getting to the point that I think is very important, which is the necessity of the channel. So why language is essentially not a whole system. That language, you are essentially compartmentalizing reality into little sound bites so you can explain it and intellectualize it. So language itself is inherently corrosive. Language itself is inherently not a whole system. No. That's, there's famous mythos like the Tower of Babel, and that mythology is literally language was given to essentially to cause us to kind of be in this semantic war with each other, right, forever.
Right.
So one of the things of the necessity of a channel is that from the evolution of consciousness of a being like Bashar, let's say, is that they necessarily would not use language to communicate. Is that true?
They have an ancient language, but they no longer really use it because they're telepathically bonded. They understand what each other is about. They connect very directly with each other in a lot of ways. It doesn't mean they lose their individuality, but they understand the whole system.
Can you explain this ancient language? Because when the experience we mentioned earlier where the three cloaked beings appeared, so I got so scared that I felt like I was dying. I started panicking. I went into full fight or flight, and I was
That's what we talked about. Yeah.
pulling the ripcord to get out.
Yeah.
And it was like I was yelling SOS, I need this to stop, and it's like I was pulled into the passenger seat as you explained it, and my body was then taken over, and I started doing these hand motions and speaking in
Same thing happened to me during that.
We both were speaking in
Yeah.
what I would have defined as tongues. It was like a light language, this clicking.
Your body was not taken over. you matched their frequency.
Yes,
Oh,
and
okay.
it seemed that the light language or whatever is being spoken and the hand motions were matching the frequency.
Yeah, light language is the precursor to full channeling. It's the energy of the information without the translation.
Okay, so that's literally what happens. They'll do the
That makes
light
sense.
language and these hand motions,
Yeah.
or will kind of automatically do it, and that will smooth us into a channeled state of consciousness.
Right.
Because the most difficult thing for us is the transition. It can be very painful. For me, it can be physically painful.
Until you get used to it. Because it
Okay.
was painful for me at the beginning too, physically. Because it's like your nerve system isn't used to handling that frequency of energy. So it needs to get stretched.
Yeah.
It's like I often say, it's like trying to get Hoover Dam through a garden hose.
Yeah.
But eventually you relax into it and then it buoys you up and leaves you energized. So you just have to get used to it and it will smooth out.
There's something
Okay.
very interesting
Thank you.
with, because when I've personally worked with DMT before, it always like pulls me in and does these weird hand things, and my body's just moving, and then
Exactly.
it stops. It won't do it again, but it literally opens up clear communication. And so I've come to realize that's it's opening something.
Yeah, I mean, you see when I'm channeling, even, Bashar will do things with my hands. My teeth will sometimes
Oh, yeah.
do this. He's saying your body is picking up on different aspects of the communication and trying to translate it. But it's not with words. It's something else that's going on. There are other aspects. It's letting people know there are other levels to the communication that are not being translated into words. And literally with regard to Bashar, sometimes he's saying that when that happens, it's my body picking up on the fact that he's talking to somebody else.
Oh my gosh.
It's not for you, it's for something else. But my body is still picking up on the fact that he's having another conversation. And it just goes
Oh my
like
god.
he's talking, but he's not talking
You
to
were
you.
doing that walking into the
That's
studio to sit down. Is that
wild.
what you think was happening?
Sometimes I'm getting more and more and more connected to him.
Oh, I'm
Yeah.
sure.
And becoming more, and I've like been doing this for 40 years, and becoming a little bit more like my version of him.
Yeah.
So sometimes I will pick up on the same kind of energies. I'm kind of like a walking antenna now, and so
Yeah.
it's just
Yeah.
kind of like something will hit me and it'll just translate.
That makes sense. Okay, so you were talking about that, you step into the passenger seat and he comes in. And so I kind of want to know both ways. Have you ever been able to peer into his world by being in that connection
all
with
the
him?
time. I mean, when he's channeling through me, I see and feel what he's seeing and feeling. If he's describing his planet, I can see it. If he's describing a situation, I can feel it. I can feel the way he feels. That's one of the more profound things that has happened in the channeling, is that I noticed right away. As a human growing up on Earth, of course, you experience things like self-doubt from time to time. The channeling state allowed me to experience what it's like for a being that never experiences doubt about anything. And it's a profoundly different state than what we experience. The level of conviction in their reality is beyond description. It's just, they just know what they know. And there is no, I wonder if, no. They are not giving us a philosophy. They are describing what they see, and they can see the structure of existence. So it's not like he's saying, this is a good philosophy for you to follow. He's saying, this is the way things work.
Yeah.
If you understand, just like I'm describing a machine to you, if you understand how it works, you can operate it properly.
100%.
If you don't, maybe it'll operate, but you might injure yourself.
Right. We're not, and that's the thing with us, is we don't pull from scripture or anything. We pull from the direct experience because that's what we know.
Right. Exactly.
It's not on the level of narrative or something we read or something we heard. It's experience because we can at least work from a knowingness out.
Right.
And so much of what you're saying, we know to be true because what we've experienced.
Right, exactly. And when you experience it, it becomes part of you. And that's what he's giving us is, I'm, again, not telling you something that I think might work. I'm telling you something I know works because I've experienced it. It's my reality, and you can be your reality because this is how reality works.
Right. And so you're giving so much context to what we're going through. It's making me emotional. But because, so with the matching of the frequency with the light language and the hand motions, where I then became, and I was in the back seat watching this happen, and I didn't understand. It didn't make sense what was being said. It was in another language, but I knew the impression of what was going on, and I was put before what I would only describe as a soul council.
Yes.
And I was speaking different languages. They were going through our past lives, and they were talking about problems we were having in our relationship at the time.
Well, we all have teams. We all have councils.
Okay.
See, again, that's what I said before. When you plan out your life path, you don't do it alone. You do it with your soul family. You do it with your friends because it's an agreement with everyone, not just you. It's an agreement with everyone. We're all interconnected in our life path agreements. So it has to be synchronized.
I'd like to ask about an experience Tanya has had. So Tanya is one of the most amazing channels I know. I'm sitting with the two probably the most amazing channels I know.
Okay, all right.
I know. He's like the legend, but I'm just saying. But she's really incredible, and I learn a lot from her, and she's one of my great teachers. You had an experience where you became conscious. And you had,
oh my gosh.
Can you tell him this story and see if you can bring clarity? Because he's the only person that would understand
yes,
this.
all of a sudden this like face appeared in front of me, and I could tell that it was like, it had feminine energy, but it looked like an ET. And then immediately she got freaked out that I could see her and like jumped back. And then there was like this big room with, it almost looked like a Coliseum, like seating, like a people were, or beings were sitting up there, and there was like one being, and they were discussing the fact that I could see them.
Yeah.
They brought them onto stage and presented her how she could see, and they were presenting why she could see.
But they were talking about me. It was so strange.
Yeah, well, I mean, that could actually be several things. It could be your own soul family council. It could be a bunch of ETs realizing that you'd broken through a threshold of awareness where you could perceive them. It could be spirit guides being interested in the fact that, same thing, you've reached a level where you can start to perceive them, because that's one of the symptoms of the advancement of our consciousness at this time in our lives is we can start perceiving things we couldn't see before because we're looking into other dimensions. Our senses are stretching. And remember, this is our creation. So it's like you can sort of see outside the bubble all of a sudden. And the ones that exist outside the bubble are surprised that you can suddenly see outside the bubble. So they start going, hey, now they have reached a place, or this person has reached a place where they can see us, where they know us. I don't know if you're familiar. There was a line in a movie. It's one of my favorite movies. Did you ever see the Mothman Prophecies?
Yeah, I love that movie.
Okay. There's a line in the movie where the protagonist asks a mentor, well, why is this being paying attention to me? And he's saying, because you noticed them and they noticed that you noticed them.
Oh, wow, yeah.
And now they're aware that you're aware of them, so they can engage with you. So that is another level of consciousness awareness, of the evolution, is you become aware of the fact that we're creating this and that there are others creating this that are not necessarily physically here, but they're engaged with us. And when you notice them, you have reached a certain point where something new can happen, something else can happen. And I think that's one of the things that leads to the idea of the fact that we're, according to Bashar, relatively imminently about to have open first contact. We have reached a point where we have noticed enough, and they've noticed that we've noticed enough, that we can be introduced to each other in the near future. Bashar has recently said, even though it might seem like, how could that happen so quickly? He's recently said, open contact is about to happen within the next 5 years.
Oh my gosh.
So get ready. But he's also let us understand that the reason that seems so quick is what you said at the beginning of this conversation. Open contact has actually been going on behind the scenes for quite a while.
Yeah.
So the idea of a public introduction that extraterrestrials are actually here is just the very end tip of something that's been happening and growing and building and evolving for quite a while.
Yes, it's taken great courage from us to be public about it, and you've blazed the trail, and it's interesting because you're talking about becoming aware of them and then becoming aware of us, and there's some sort of understanding or awareness of when we're having these interactions. It's almost like we're in a pit and they're throwing a rope and there's a bridges being formed, being woven, and it's bridges of awareness.
Right.
And does that explain a little bit of the protocol in terms of why it is the way it is, in that they make themselves aware so we become aware, and then we can kind of... They've said to us multiple times, we're merging the worlds. Yeah. And I don't know what that means. Like, what worlds? Like, their world and ours? Dimensions?
Yes. Merging the dimensions.
Yes, because, again, remember, it's all different parallel realities, and you have to create a parallel reality that contains both realities. That's another parallel reality. So it's a blending of two different parallel realities that creates a unique third reality in which what was separate can now interact. That's its own reality. So it can be looked at as a blending of realities.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. Can we talk about the fear that is antithetical to the processy that you're talking about? There's a lot of old programming when it comes to religion of demonism and of bad forces, entities, and when it comes to this encounter, and let me be honest, I viewed it, I kicked and screamed my first encounter. I completely viewed it through a lens of fear. And being dragged through, I don't know how many, 100 hours of suffering in these ceremonies before I could understand that there was nothing to fear.
Right.
So what would you say to the people that call this demonic and possession? Because that's probably the number one hate we get thrown our way.
That's the comments.
That is the comment
I'm
section.
Familiar with that. Bashar, actually, synchronistically enough, it hasn't aired yet, but the recording of the next Bashar event session on Zoom is exactly about that subject. And what he said is, look, I'm going to paraphrase this very quickly. Demons are not an independent entity. They are the negative side of the archetypal collective consciousness of our people.
That's what we think.
They manifest as your level of fear carves them out of the clay of our collective consciousness and represents what the issue is that you're dealing with on the negative side, on the dark side. And that's why in the past we instinctively say, face your demons, because they are your demons. They're not independent beings. They are our demons. We create them as a way of creating something, manifesting something that is more tangible out of the collective archetypal consciousness of our society, of our species. And that's why in the past people made lists of the demonic qualities. And if you look at those lists, you will see that they are simply the negative qualities of humanity. There's a demon of greed, there's a demon of lust, there's a demon, So it's like, yeah, we're facing that, but it's our creation reflected back to us in a way that helps us understand how to go through the process of overcoming that. They're not independent entities. They're our creations.
That's brilliant and so well said. The word that really keyed for me was reflected. Because the interesting thing is when we face those demons, we view them as demons, so we begin to behave demonically. So we'll attack the demons.
Yeah.
We start to become the thing that we think it is, as opposed to loving it and healing it.
Exactly. And loving ourselves and healing ourselves,
Yes.
which is what makes the demon vanish. And that's why, again, instinctively humanity has known this, but it's come out in folkloric ways, folkloric statements, folklore. So that's why in the past they said, well, to get power over a demon, you have to know its name. It's your name.
Oh.
So you have to know its name. You have to know what it's about. You have to understand. I mean, you know, when you stop and think about that logically, well, how would knowing its name give you any power over something that's an independent entity? Knowing its name means you are honestly seeing what it really is. And it's you. It's a reflection of something you're facing. And you've manifested this being out of the clay of collective consciousness because we can do that.
Whoa.
I mean, that we have been playing around with this idea as well of the same thing of that also collective fear towards something can create an entity.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You literally carve it out of the energy of the collective consciousness.
So therefore, if that's true, does that mean entities can exist with of negativity just created out of the fear
Temporarily,
of mankind?
yeah, temporarily, but they don't have a life of their own. They exist only off of your energy. They don't have a life of their own. They're not real in that sense.
Whoa. Okay, mind blown. Okay, I think what you just said is so beautiful and eloquent and important. Unfortunately, a lot of people who need to hear that will say, that's Satan telling you that.
Of course. Again, you're not here to change anyone's mind. You're here to say, here's an optional way to look at something that may be more self-empowering if that's what you're seeking in life, as opposed to playing the victim.
Yes.
So if you're tired of playing the victim, here's an alternative way of looking at this thing that actually does make a difference in how you experience them.
Right. Well, while we're on the concept of illusion, there is a concept around centralization spiritually when it comes to unification, dissolving separation, right? These are themes that are being explored. When it comes to the idea of centralized government, a centralized world, it is only discussed through the lens of fear and globalism.
Sure.
There's so much corruption in so many different governments and corporations that people essentially fear that if we centralize, that at this time that it will be bad actors, running the show.
Yeah, and that's possibly true because we understand our choices that we've made and how that may continue because many people think that they're getting a benefit out of behaving that way. But again, here's one of the things that could very well change over the next couple of decades when we have open contact, because one of the things we're going to get from the ETs is the whole understanding of planetary management. How do you manage a planet for the benefit of all?
So this is...
We need that.
We need this. And so we feel like there are so many problems, and you could go from our food or the environment or the prison, the industrial complex, war, whatever. There's so many problems. We view those as symptoms of a sick consciousness. And we view that plant medicine is something that can treat consciousness. But even beyond the healing, because we do feel like we're a little bit on a ticking clock when it comes to nuclear war, we know that... what is the doomsday clock? Is at 90 seconds?
Not going to happen.
Yeah, thank God. Are you sure? Yeah?
Positive.
Woo! Well, that's why they're here, right?
That's the one thing they will intervene with.
Okay.
Basically, the idea of a hands-off policy, what a lot of people in sci-fi recognize as the prime directive, does exist. They have to allow us to evolve on our own. Small things, local things, even nuclear local things, they can't intervene because it's our evolution, it's our path, it's our choices. Global thermonuclear war would affect more than the Earth. The amount of energy and power released during something like that could literally tear through the fabric of other dimensions and affect other beings, as well as the whole Earth itself, which... let's just say we're not the only ones interested in maintaining the Earth in a natural state. And therefore, if it goes beyond our borders, they won't allow that. They've demonstrated that, even if people don't quite understand the demonstrations, over and over again, even through events where UFOs have hovered over missile silos and erased the launch codes. That's basically a very clear demonstration of, you can't do that. Anything else short of that, it's your planet. But you can't do that because it goes beyond your backyard, into our backyard, and you can't do that.
Well, that's good to know.
Can you speak? By the way, we hung out with Lou Elizondo, and he literally referenced that thing as a negative to motivate the national defense agenda.
Oh, I understand.
I couldn't believe it. I was like, they turned off the nukes.
Yeah.
To tell us to denuclearize. He's like, they can turn off our nukes. What else can they do? I'm like, oh, come on,
Yeah,
man.
you can look at it that way, but again, I don't think that's the reason for it. Because if they really wanted to take over, they could have done so a long time ago.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
and that's sort of where I would love to take this, is in terms of the protocol and the implications of the protocol, right? So the fact that they are rolling themselves out in a non-invasive way that is in coherence with the law of free will, right? With a lot of spiritual laws,
Right.
implies a certain intelligence, a certain restraint, a certain Gandhian-like level of patience, especially when it comes to that. We've shot many of them out of the sky. So my question is, are we under some sort of quarantine?
I think we have been in a somewhat hands-off situation. I don't think we're so much anymore, because they're mostly now leaving it up to us to decide when we're ready for contact. And as I've said, it seems that regardless of what many people think, it appears that they're thinking we're ready within the next few years. So I don't think the quarantine exists anymore, and they're just looking at make the next move. The ball's in your court.
In our court.
Yeah.
How many of us is it going to take to reaching back out to trigger the switch?
Not many.
Not many.
Well, remember, it takes less positively oriented people to outweigh negative oriented people, because positive orientation is collective and expansive and connective, and negative is segregational and separated, and therefore weaker energy. So it only takes a smaller amount of positive to outweigh the negative. And again, it has to do with timing and agreements of what happens in that timing in the life path. And it doesn't matter that a lot of people physically don't remember making the agreement to be here when such a thing would happen. It doesn't matter if they don't remember it. They agreed to it. So I think that in the next few years, that's simply the timing we agreed to. It's going to happen. And it's going to be what needs to happen, because humanity has, well, American Indians call this, or something like it in different indigenous cultures, like the third world or the fourth world that's happened on this planet. In other words, we've kind of risen up and collapsed, and risen up and collapsed, and risen up and collapsed. And we're rising up again, and they're not going to let us collapse again.
So
That's
has
what I was
Bashar said
told
that?
also.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You were told this?
That's what I was told. The first time I ever met ETs, they literally said that humans couldn't go backwards, which means like restart.
Yeah.
And they were really interested in when humans found their power.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
there's again, you have to look at, there's a bigger picture going on in the galaxy in terms of what our place is in it. And this maybe kind of goes back to the idea of looking at us a little bit from one perspective, like children. It's like, okay, you've stubbed your toe, you've skinned your knees, you've fallen down and broken a bone, and now I see you doing the same behavior again, but I know that the next time you do that, I'm going to lose the child. So I'm going to step in as an adult, and I'm going to say, here's what you need to do to make sure you're safe and that you can actually grow up. Because I've noticed that you've been a little clumsy along the way, and it's gotten worse and worse and worse. And now as the adult, I have to step in and say, let's change your behavior a little bit so that you don't keep injuring yourself to the point where you're not going to recover. Because you're important to this family, and we can't let you do that, not only to yourself, but to us again. You have to finally grow up and take your place among society. And I mean society. Because again, something is bigger than us that exists around us, and we're only just awakening to that fact.
There's a lot of us who have woken up to a lot of this, but many of us are so traumatized by the disillusionment and the corruption and the lies that they can't heal that trauma.
No.
Right.
But that's their life path. And
Definitely.
again, they don't have to in this life. Their soul will deal with it on some other level at some other time.
There-
But this is what we agreed to.
Right. There's many people that feel that because there's a ubiquity of a flood myth across all different cultures, and a very common thing with that flood myth is a group of beings like the Hopi who were taken underground by the ant people, or Noah's Ark, that people who sort of apply the ancient alien theory or the modern alien theory to it, they believe that ETs are presenting themselves because there is some great calamity coming, and they will let it happen, but they will save certain people to restart the planet.
No, the calamities really, I mean, yes, they do happen. The natural disasters do happen, and it's happened many times. I don't think that we need to go through that again. And I think that's why they're stepping in. I think that's the point. I think we may be sensing that that's the potential of what we're heading for. But I think the idea of quote unquote stepping in and saving us is more about bringing us to our senses and saying, that's enough of this. You guys need to wake up. You guys need to grow up, and you need to really become adults. So, it's kind of like, yeah, okay, I understand you're making all this chatter and stuff like that, but the adults are talking now. Just listen. Okay? So this is how you grow up. This is how you mature. This is how you survive. So stepping in and saving us, I think, is more a matter of education than it is lifting people off the planet at this point, because we haven't gotten there quite yet. So they have time, we have time. If they are willing to step in, which it seems they're about to do, we can really benefit from having an adult in the room.
Right.
When it comes to if we do have open contact within 5 years, is there anything that you would tell, the human race to be able to do in order to help them prepare for something like this?
Don't panic. Everything will be okay. I don't know that there is one caveat that would serve everyone. There's going to be some difficulty for people. Many things will change, and I know that that's going to be tough for some people to handle. But in the end, I think it'll be okay. Like I said, you really have to understand, when you really just take an honest look at things, that things have been very messy down here, and that these beings are presenting us with an opportunity to really kind of get our stuff together. And I think if people can start relaxing and being calmed and say, look, like I said before, if we wanted to do something harmful to you, we would have a long time ago. We certainly have the ability to do that. I wrote a story once, and it was a very short little story. And the basis of the story is that this great mothership from a very advanced civilization introduces itself to another society who doesn't have that. And the society, when they get used to these beings, are basically saying, look at all of the power that you have. You're so powerful because you could take the energy of the ship and you could wipe this planet out. You could take, the energy that you have, you could take over this world. And the people in the ship said, no, we're powerful because we don't do that. Because we have all this power and don't use it that way. That's what makes us powerful. Anyone can destroy. It takes power to create. So I think when people can relax into the idea of how the ETs will be introduced, because I think they'll be introduced slowly, carefully, and probably the ones that are most like us first, even maybe to the point where somebody officially might say, this is an ET, and somebody might go, nah, you're kidding. Just looks like a person. So right there's a calming influence, because some of them look like us, or
Closer to.
we look like them.
Right.
Yeah.
That's another story. But that can help. I think they understand the way in which the introductions need to occur. And remember, this is not necessarily their first rodeo in terms of introducing themselves to a civilization.
Oh, okay.
Bashar is a first contact specialist. What does that mean? It means he's done this before. How many times? Probably hundreds. They know what they're doing, and they understand us. They've been observing us for a long time. They understand what we're afraid of. But I think they will be gentle in their introduction enough so that it's possible that some people may finally just sort of calm down and go, yeah, I guess they're not so bad, and
Right.
start listening to them.
Is this going to happen on a governmental level or a personal level?
Both, I think.
Okay. Has it already happened within the government bodies? Some people think that.
This is one of the things I meant by there's been things going on behind the scenes that people don't know about.
Okay.
I think that ETs have been working with certain scientists and government officials for quite some time. And this is the end result of them working together to bring certain things to our society and say, look, we're introducing this to your society that will take care of this problem. We're introducing this that will bring you free energy. We're starting to introduce this that will feed your population. You know, let's work together.
So you believe the government, it's not actually as nefarious as people think. You believe it's...
No, and when the government, I
Yeah.
think there are aspects within the government
Yeah.
Right.
that understand this. You can't just say the government.
Yeah, right. It's such a sweeping, generalized
Yeah.
umbrella term, which is sort of the problem we're going through a lot. There's
Exactly.
a lot of this generalization,
Exactly.
demonization, black and
Right.
white view of things that
Yeah.
we've got to get past.
There are those in certain positions who know this is going on who are for the idea of disclosure, and they're working toward that with the aliens. Again, that's the funny thing is, people go, well, okay, open contact's going to happen. Then we're going to prepare for this. We're going to have these ambassadors. We're going to do this. And no one talks about, well, what do the aliens think disclosure is going to be like?
That's what
From
yeah.
their point of view, how should it actually happen? We never think about the fact that they may have ideas about how open contact is actually supposed to unfold.
If
Yeah.
they're coming all
How-
the way here, they got to have a
How
better idea.
Yeah.
should it actually happen? Do you have any insights into
Well, I
this?
think one of the things I just described, maybe one of the aspects, they do something that you're familiar with first. Here's an ET. Nah, looks like me. Exactly. Nothing to be afraid of here. So they understand our psychology.
Right. Dolores Cannon's work, she
Yeah.
outlines that part of the protocol is actually aliens incarnate. Well, sorry not to use that term. But
Yes.
ETs incarnating into human bodies to sort of begin the. Yeah. Is there anything?
That's
to that?
one of the things Bashar has always said. When a first contact specialist is going to contact a civilization, they first have a life in that civilization, incarnationally, because otherwise we wouldn't understand each other. It would be too alien.
I mean, it's interesting. Essentially, you're saying Bashar is a hybrid, and that the hybridization program, which so I know you went over it a little bit, and it was more about regaining their ability to procreate and reconnect to their heart.
And get the emotionality back. Yeah.
Right, but is a byproduct of that also that they've essentially, I mean, what better way to essentially create first contact than to say, hey, we're presenting a not aliens, they're hybrid race. They're part
They're part of you. Yeah. They're
Right.
part of you. So, yeah, that's one aspect of it. And again, the idea is they get familiar with all of the aspects of humanity. They understand our psychology. They understand what we're going through because they've personally experienced it not only in their own evolution, but they've experienced it by having an incarnation. So they can relate to us. So they plan the idea of how to make contact based on that specific civilization's needs and how they would best experience the idea that would be most beneficial. Even if it's a little rough at the beginning because of our reaction, they're still going to do it in the gentlest way possible, because otherwise what would be the point if they just panic everyone? It would just turn the whole thing upside down and they wouldn't be able to make contact with us.
Yeah.
And that's important to them. It's important to them.
You get one shot.
Kind of, yeah. You get one shot. And that's one of the reasons, Bashar said, because people have asked him, well, what's your training to be a first contact specialist. And he's saying what they do is, because they're telepathic, they create telepathic simulations of interacting with a different civilization so that they can make all the mistakes in what seems like a fully realized simulated environment, that they're really actually doing it, and they're telepathically convinced that they're doing it.
Are you saying we might be in one right now?
Maybe. But what I'm saying is, on their planet, they actually have mentors that create a literal telepathic simulation to the point where they cannot tell it's not real.
Wow.
And therefore, they make all their mistakes in the simulation. And then once they get it really refined, then they can go and start actually really interacting with the civilization after also having the incarnational experience and all. There are several stages to becoming a first contact specialist in their civilization. They have to know what they're doing.
Wow.
The
They can't-
depths to
they-
all of this is
yeah.
wild.
They can't just wing it. They have to know what they're doing.
Wow.
Daryl, this is all brilliant. One of the intentions we have with this show is to teach people how to channel, to teach people how to be their own conduit for the higher dimensions of consciousness, to heal themselves, to gain higher learning, right? So to go straight to the well, do you have any insights or teachings for how people can begin to develop transmediumship or channeling?
Well, again, it falls back to Bashar's formula of acting on your passion, taking it as far as you can until you could take it no further, making sure that when the excitement wanes, you're not the one dampening it with your fear-based beliefs, but that it's waning naturally, which means you look for something else that contains more excitement than anything else. You don't have any insistence or assumption as to what the outcome should be. You stay in a positive state no matter what manifests, because even if it's something you don't objectively prefer, it's there for a reason. So learn from it, use it in a positive way, you'll get a benefit from it, and then constantly look at your belief systems and let go of the fear-based and negative ones. That starts a whole ball of wax of different effects going on in your life that then propel you and guide you automatically. More synchronicity in a positive way, path of least resistance, all sorts of things start happening that really just boost you in the direction of what you can potentially be. So following that formula is like following an instruction manual. When you get an instruction manual to operate a piece of machinery, you don't add instructions, you don't take instructions away. You follow the instructions. The machine will work to your benefit as advertised. Bashar is simply saying that this is physics, here's the instruction manual, act on it precisely to the best you can, just do your best, you'll see that it works. And that's one of the things that I like the most about the information that has come through from him. You don't have to believe that Bashar exists. You don't have to believe that he's real. I can't prove it to anybody. This could be another aspect of my own consciousness that I'm channeling. Who knows? Ultimately, if he's going to land and say, hi, here I am, we'll have all the concrete proof we need. The real thing to focus on is that the information proves itself to be real. Because when you apply the principles in the formula, you actually get an effect. Your life actually changes in very positive ways. That's all the proof I need, is that the information actually works. And that's really the most important thing for people to focus on, because it's not about him. It's about, do we have information here that can improve our lives? That's the most important thing.
Daryl, thank you
Well
so
said.
much for all your wisdom today.
Yeah, Daryl, we appreciate you so much.
Thank you.
We appreciate the work you've done.
Well, I appreciate you guys having this kind of a portal through which information can be shared with other people.
Yep.
Yes.
So that's important too. So you're doing the work, I'm doing the work, we're all doing the work together, again, by agreement.
By agreement. We're excited to keep walking each other home and walking down this path and seeing where it takes us. And, like, we're here to support you and uplift you and amplify your voice and your teachings.
Thanks.
And yeah, man.
If they want to know anything about Bashar's information, they can go to bashar.org, BASHAR.org. If they want to know what I'm doing in terms of writing books and making movies, they can go to darrylanka.com, DARRYLANKA.com. And if they want to come and play in our escape room in Calabasas, California, they can go to boggledescaperooms.com, BOGGLED, boggledescaperooms.com, because that's representative of following my passion.
Beautiful. And check out his documentary, First Contact, that he directed. It's truly
beautiful.
beautiful.
Yeah, it's available, I think, on Amazon through distributed by Indie Rights Movies.
Amazing. Amazing. All right. This has been the Acid for Squares podcast. Please, if you made it this long, rate, subscribe,
subscribe,
follow,
all the things.
share it, send it to your mother. Let's get real weird with it. All right. We got about 5 years, right? 5 years time?
Within 5 years.
Oh,
Within 5
my God.
years.
It's coming
All right.
quick. All right, guys. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Be well.